It's 4 a.m. in Delaware. You are asleep on your side. You feel a gentle touch on your shoulder. You've been going through a rough patch recently, and you get a little excited. Now you feel a nose and a soft breath on your back. So faint, yet so promising. Maybe this relationship can bounce back. You're finally going to get some action. You turn over, and it's Joe Biden. You wake up in a cold sweat, but strangely, you still have a heart on. And that's America. I'm your host, Nicholas Nunez, and this is the No Good News Podcast. It's winter in the Northeast. The people are desperate and ready for change. Now, I know what you're thinking. Did I really have a dream about Joe Biden? Now, this is a comedy podcast, so I always tell the truth, even when I lie. You see, this dream about Joe Biden is really what America dreamed of when they elected him. They thought there'd be change. They thought things would get better. This country was in a real dark place when COVID happened. They closed down our businesses. They told us to stay inside. They even had us get vaccinated with the threat of unemployment. Now, we're not going to get into the science of that vaccine, but I will confess, I do have the JJ double dose. But now, the people are fed up. Inflation is on the rise, and they're ready for change again. But you see, the thing is, in the same way that you wake up with Joe Biden next to you, breathing on your neck, that's the safety, that's the security. Joe Biden is the girl that you need. She'll guide you through uncertain times, and she's that stable force in your life. But we've been in a rough patch recently, and now we're not going to get the girl that we need. We're going to get the girl that we deserve, and that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is going to bring chaos into your life. You thought things were crazy now? We're just getting started. Have you seen this cabinet? We've got a TV host running the Secretary of Defense. This guy lobbied Donald Trump in his first term to get Donald to pardon war criminals called Blackwater. Have you heard of these guys?
No.
So Blackwater is a private army of former special ops guys. So they used to work for the government. They've since retired, and now they privately work for a company. I mean, the company no longer exists, but the company's name is Blackwater. These guys would do simple routine missions like flying a helicopter to deliver materials onto a Navy cruiser. But in darker times in the Middle East, these guys would deploy into like Kabul or some random XYZ mountain town of Afghanistan. And they would go in and they would shred people. And the United States government would deploy them for missions that were illegal for Americans to do. Too dangerous, too extreme, would catch too much attention from the public eye. We'd send these guys in, and they weren't wearing American badges, but they were American soldiers for all effective purposes. Other countries do this too. Russia has their own private militaries. In fact, maybe it was a year and a half ago, there was a guy who ran a private Russian army, essentially their version of Blackwater. And he tried to do a coup against Putin. Did you hear about this?
No.
So this guy basically tried to overturn Russia, and he tried to work with the United States. We attempted a coup against Putin. I mean, it was probably about a year and a half ago. Petrosian? I don't know. Can you look this guy up?
Yeah, sure.
But by the way, this guy's dead now. They put him on a plane and he's dead. But what I'm trying to say is, this guy they want to go for Secretary of Defense got Trump to pardon these Blackwater war criminals. A lot of these guys went to jail Okay, let's see. We got the name here. Yeah, Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense guy. Thank you, producer, for the name. But can we please look up the name of the gentleman who tried to overthrow Putin about a year and a half ago?
Yes.
He did a military coup. This was like Putin's number one, number two guy. We'll get that name in a second. But while we get that information, these Blackwater guys got deployed and they killed a bunch of civilians, a bunch of them, when they shouldn't have. And not only did they kill civilians, but when an ambulance came to provide medical care for those that were injured but still alive, the Blackwater guys came back about 20 to 30 minutes later and killed the medical personnel that were trying to save the innocent civilians. You guys should really look into this. So these guys are the definition of, wheels off, no wheels, completely out of control. And this guy Hegseth got Trump to pardon these Blackwater war criminals. Now, really quick, just for completeness, we got the name. This guy's name is Prigozhin, Prigozhin. You could look this guy up. He led a group called Wagner, which was the Russian version of Blackwater. Thank you, producer. So in short, this guy Pete is absolutely crazy. I mean, not to mention, I saw this guy doing Irish tap dance on the news this morning. Literally. He's doing tap dance, and now he's going to be running the Secretary of Defense.
God.
Yeah, exactly. It's just completely unreasonable. Now, look, he is a veteran, right? He did serve. But just because you're a veteran doesn't mean that you understand the logistics involved with running the Secretary of Defense. And also, just as much as the position is about competence, it's about public perception, right? I mean, we know that this guy is a massive Zionist. And now, look, let me be clear. I stand with Israel. I support Israel over Palestine. But I do not support the idea of Israel completely annexing Gaza and the West Bank. That's too far for me. And this guy, Hegseth, is an absolute Zionist. So let's make that clear. He's a terrible pick. Now, Trump does have some good picks, but this goes back to my earlier point that, Biden's picks, you probably couldn't even name any of them, even though you hate them all, right? All of you listeners, you love to complain, but you probably really couldn't name any of these guys. You can maybe talk about how Pete Buttigieg isn't good at running the FAA, some bullshit like that. But at the end of the day, these Trump picks, you're going to know all their names. They're going to be in every headline, and they're going to be doing some crazy stuff. Now, some of it's going to be good. Some of it's going to be bad. But it's more of that chaos element. And in the chaos, this country is going to have a lot of internal division. Now, I do think that internationally, we're going to do much better. I think that internationally, I think that less wars are going to start. I'd be very surprised if China moved on Taiwan. And let me also be clear on that. I actually have no problem with China moving on Taiwan. We got to worry about our own people, not these other countries. But in the short term, I do think that we have to defend Taiwan for a very simple reason. Approximately 80% of all advanced microchips on Earth are made in Taiwan. You heard that right, 80%. So you have a phone in your pocket right now? That chip came from Taiwan. Probably from TSMC, which is the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC. Huge company. They make a large number of the advanced chips. And I believe another 10% come from Samsung, and then 10% would be under what's considered other, miscellaneous, etc. But we basically got one big player in this field, which is TSMC. Gets to a bigger problem about oligopolization and monopolization in our economies in pretty much every industry. But we got to defend Taiwan at least until they can get some of these plants up and running in the United States with the CHIPS Act. By the way, CHIPS Act, something I support from Joe Biden. Very good bill. Get that chip manufacturing, those fabs, fabrication facilities. These are the places where they actually make the chips. For those of you who don't understand or don't know the history of microchip manufacturing, it was actually started in the United States. I mean, obviously we created the microchip. The United States literally created the internet. It's called ARPANET. That was the first thing it was. And it was made by DARPA, I believe, which is still exists. It's a subset of the military where basically they do experimental, technology. These drones flying over Jersey that we'll talk about in a bit, that might be DARPA. But what I'm trying to say here is we used to not only make the software and the coding for microchips, which we still do, but we would also produce them ourselves in fabs, which is short for fabrication units. Well, these scientists in the fabs, they got paid a lot of money. These were Americans making a lot of money. They got degrees in probably electrical engineering, some sort of, whatever, data engineering, whatever. Well, Taiwan was a growing economy, but also a backwater of Asia. This place is basically a jungle. They got an island going on here. So the government of Taiwan comes out and they subsidize a bunch of these companies in Taiwan. And I forget the exact name, and it's not really that important, but it basically translates to like family operation or government operation. These are companies that were started with government subsidy. So, in the United States, we subsidize, we give money to our companies. Ford almost shut down, we bail them out. We usually use the term bailout, but bailout and subsidy are pretty much synonymous here. Bailout just distinguishes if a company's about to go bankrupt, whereas a subsidy is something that can really happen at any time. The government of Taiwan creates, through subsidy, a bunch of companies, and these companies, a lot of them became internationals or multinationals, like TSMC. Korea actually did the same thing, by the way. We've got Samsung, I believe Mitsubishi, but that might be Japanese. Either way, there's a lot of LG. I know LG for sure. I believe that's a Korean company. So Korea and Taiwan pretty much had the same economic model, which is they used government money, government subsidy to create these companies that became multinationals and exporters. And TSMC became so powerful because their prices were so low that for a long time they weren't even making a profit. The government was just funneling tax money into them, running at a loss, running their competitors out of business, and now they have a near monopoly. So all the fabs in the United States got shut down. And a lot of these companies like Cisco, Microsoft, Intel, they said, fuck it, let's just export the fabs and let's use a different developer, let's shut down our own, and let's get them from TSMC. Now, we need to keep Taiwan safe until we can get these fabs rebuilt in America. After that, I really don't think we should be defending this place. I don't think we should go to war with China over Taiwan. In the same way, I don't think we should go to Russia over Ukraine. And in the same way, I don't think we should go to war with Iran over Israel. We shouldn't be going to war with these other countries. The United States was always a country that was neutral, but we were neutral and strong. You see, the Swiss are neutral, but they're not strong. It's just annoying to invade them, but they have no offensive threats. The United States is supposed to be a place that is not only your worst nightmare to invade, but also a powerful force that can defend our allies abroad. But we don't have a defense agreement or like an Article 5 situation where basically if Taiwan gets attacked, we have to attack their aggressor. And nor should we. Europe is a place for that. Europe is a very unstable region. Throughout all of history, Europe's been really unstable. And at this point, we have a defense agreement with Article 5 in Europe because Europe, I would argue that basically the entire continent of Europe is an American colony. And that's why we have an Article 5 agreement with them. Because in the same way that if someone invades Florida, Pensacola, in the same way if someone invades Pensacola, that we go to war with that invader, that's basically what happens if somebody invades England or France or Germany, God forbid. Because these are basically our colonies. We occupy all of Europe with thousands of soldiers, the planes. This might not be true anymore, but like the biggest airport in Germany is an American Air Force base called Ramstein Air Force Base. This place is massive. Producer, you should look this up. Could you get me the square footage or like the square acreage? Some kind of land assessment of Ramstein Air Force Base. This place is huge, guys. I mean, honestly, we probably have nuclear weapons there, for all I know. We got 5,100 acres in the Rhineland. We all know what the Rhineland is, don't we? Right? That's Hitler's big thing. He loves the Rhineland. So we've got this massive 5,000-acre facility in Germany. Multiple runways, jets, planes, everything you can imagine, bombs. Because Europe has become our colony. They give us things, and we give them printed money, which is something we'll get to in just a bit here. My only point is we shouldn't be getting involved in this Taiwan business. And although Trump says he's anti-war, he's putting a lot of war hawks in his cabinet. Now, Tulsi's involved in the cabinet, and we know Tulsi is an isolationist. She's not really into war. But if I remember correctly, Tulsi's doing something with national security, like intelligence. She's not doing anything with the Secretary of Defense. By the way, the Secretary of Defense, it's such a bad name. Why do we call this the Defense Department? When we call it the Defense Department, not only is that just false, because as Americans, we don't wage defense. We wage war. We invade places. So we should call it the Secretary of War, the Department of War, which is what I believe it actually used to be called. I think Abe Lincoln, one of those older presidents, changed the name to Secretary of Defense. But we should go back and name it the Secretary of War, because that's what it is. We're a real threat here. And, so we should be, So we should be projecting power with this name. Secretary of Defense is it's almost like an Orwellian term. We should call it the Secretary of War. Strike fear into our enemies. We shouldn't call it the Secretary of Defense. We should call it maybe the Department of Invasion. That's what we should call it. So just so you know exactly what's going on here, because here's the truth of the matter. Whenever any world power gets invaded, the second any world power is playing defense, it's probably the end. It's the beginning of the end. Let's look at the English Empire. Beautiful speech from Winston Churchill I was listening to in the car today. I've been playing a very excellent game, and I've been having some relations with a player. I've been playing diplomacy, for those of you in the audience who are aware of this game. And I'm playing Germany, and I'm in some conflict with the player playing England. He's a great player, by the way, very excellent player. And I realized in that moment that there was a very real chance, possibly, that I could lose this conflict. So I went online and I listened to Winston Churchill's "We Will Fight on the Beaches" speech. This is a great speech. Producer, have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
It's a beautiful speech. The "Fight on the Beaches" speech was given in light of the battle, I believe it was called the Battle of Britain. And basically what happened here was the Royal Air Force, the RAF, was completely wiped out, more or less, for all intensive purposes. And the Luftwaffe, I believe that's how you pronounce that, the German Air Force, were running bombing raids over London, dropping bombs, killing civilians. And, for those of you who feel upset, don't feel bad, because then we dropped so many bombs on Dresden that the concrete literally melted and people sunk into the concrete and literally died.
Terrible visual.
Terrible visual, and that's what actually happened. So don't feel bad for the people of London. Feel bad for the Nazis who lived in Dresden. Anyways, beautiful speech here. And Winston Churchill more or less says, we will fight on the beaches, we will fight in the cities, we will never surrender. Beautiful speech. And I was channeling that energy as a German, as I was playing Germany against England. And I was really hoping that the gentleman I was attacking wouldn't have a similar worldview. And I think that I don't think that's the case, thank goodness. But you see, England was invaded, more or less. I mean, they lost all their colonies. They tried to fight in France. They got destroyed. There was a very famous battle that I'm forgetting the name of. It was on the shore in the English Channel. And what's the name of this war? Where the English army was basically completely surrounded. It's Dunkirk.
Mm-hmm.
Dunkirk. There we go. The Battle of Dunkirk. England gets basically eviscerated. They do a successful retreat, but if you're at the point where you're getting excited about a retreat, things probably aren't looking too good for you. And then we saw the complete collapse of the British Empire. So we shouldn't call it the Department of Defense. We should call it the Department of Invasion, the Department of War, maybe the Department of Fear, something like that, because we don't want people to even think that we're playing defense. We are perpetually playing offense. We're the United States, baby. So, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, producer. Yeah, get that eagle sound. So, that's Pete Hegseth. Now, the rest of the cabinet's all right, but this is the No Good News podcast, so we're only pessimists here. We're not going to talk about good things. Maybe I'll sprinkle in a few as we go on. Okay, I'm going to take a water break, quick ad break, and then we'll continue. Are you looking to hack biology? Or is it impossible for you to run a calorie deficit? Do you have type 2 diabetes? Or even better, do you not? You should try Ozempic. Ozempic is a drug that is prescribed, and it allows you to lose weight or treat type 2 diabetes. All depends on your income level, depends on what you can afford. But Ozempic is aware of the large demand for their excellent product. And in this holiday season, to spread the cheer, use code TRIM30 for 30 pounds off. Back from the ad break, we were discussing foreign policy, the Secretary of War, and Trump's views on isolationism and intervention. And that brings us to the opposite, diametrically opposed. Recently in the news, we've got Joe Biden giving $1 billion to Angola. Raise your hand if you know where Angola is. That's right, none of you. We're giving $1 billion to Angola, an African nation, you could have probably guessed that piece, for homes destroyed by natural disasters. You smell the irony? We had a massive hurricane go through Boone, North Carolina. People are still living in tents. Some people haven't even been found. Interstates are destroyed. I'm in town tonight. I came back from Tennessee today. I had to add an hour and a half of drive time to my commute because Interstate 40 is still destroyed, pieces of it, from this hurricane. And that's what pisses me off most, because I was inconvenienced. We're giving $1 billion to Angola. Now, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this instead of helping our own people? For, by the way, a much lower price than $1 billion. Oh, let's not forget about the fires that destroyed Hawaii, and that place is still in tatters, right? We just go from one natural disaster to the next. Fuck it, Florida just got hit by hurricanes as well. My coworker's whole house got washed away. It was made of brick. You know what that takes to wash away bricks? But we're giving $1 billion to Angola. Why are we doing this? We're looking to gain favor. You see, Angola is allied with China. And that's actually from the Soviet days. From the Soviet days, there was basically another scramble for Africa where, the United States and the Soviet Union were trying to pay off and bribe different, African nations for their natural resources. And China, through what's called the Belt and Road Initiative, which is basically their plan to instigate fourth wave colonialism on the undeveloped world. Brilliant strategy, by the way. They're trying to get Angola in their good graces to extract the natural resources and mineral wealth within the nation. Well, we're giving $1 billion to Angola and hoping that Angola will build a rail network from the heart of their nation to their coastline. Now, the Angolan coast lies on the Atlantic, but right now, the current deal that Angola has set up is they're actually developing infrastructure not to the sea, but through their neighbors in the west, other landlocked nations, to connect with China's network. So we're hoping to stall that development and instead have them transport their goods to the Atlantic, which will make it much cheaper for the United States and our allies to buy those natural resources, and we can more easily block Chinese access. But this is once again us playing empire, which I support, by the way. I love the American empire. The sun never sets on the American empire. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't prioritize our own people. So once again, massive contrast from Trump's rhetoric. Now, what will he actually do in office? Who's to see? We haven't found out yet. But I'm hoping that we at least get these people of North Carolina back in shelter. I got a lot of friends who go to school out there. It's a big thing. It's a big thing down here in Carolina for those of you listening in the Northeast. To wrap up on Biden here, he also did a huge pardon recently. Recently, people are all up in arms because Biden pardoned his son. Okay, let's start with the obvious. It's hypocritical. He's going on the news saying that he will not pardon his son and that he will respect the outcome of whatever the jury decides. That's what he says on the news before the election. Now, why does he say this? Well, he says this because he wanted to present himself and the Democratic Party as the party of law and as the party of impartial justice. That was the angle he was going for. And he made a huge miscalculation. You see, Biden assumed that the American people care about justice. The American people do not care about justice. We are a nation of cowboys, criminals, and gangsters, and thieves. We don't care about justice. So all this highfalutin talk from the Democrat Party about justice is misplaced. That's why people love Trump. They love Trump because he's a criminal. There's something so American about Trump because he's a brazen criminal. Dude has robbed people in casinos, made a fake university, puts his name on everything, massive ego. And you know what? These are not admirable traits. Let me be clear. These are not admirable traits. But at the same time, Trump's more American than any of us. It's the caricature of this great nation of ours. And that's why we're so great, because we got a bunch of criminals running around. Imagine what would happen if you took a bunch of selfish people who will steal from each other and gave them the chance to create wealth in a legal manner. All of a sudden, you've now met your first CEO, your first executive, your startups, your rug pulls, for those of you in the crypto community. That's what this is. We're a land of criminals, and everybody always gets so upset and so surprised when we allow these mergers in the FTC. We let these massive companies merge and get even bigger. We get surprised when a massive housing crisis destroys the American economy and has ripple effects and basically sends the whole world into a 3 or 4 year recession. And then we get upset and surprised when only one guy is sent to jail. Some low-level guy is sent to jail. No, that's the essence of America. The essence of America is not being punished for your sins. That's what it is. So now Biden tries to run as holier than thou, saying that he won't pardon his son, and then he does pardon his son, and he looks like a fool. You see, his mistake, what he should have done? He should have just said from the start, yeah, I'm going to pardon my son. He might have even won the election if he said that. If he just came out and said, yeah, I'm going to pardon my son. My son's a criminal crack addict who was paid off by Ukraine through Burisma, and we cut deals with the Ukrainian government, and you know what? You like it. He might have actually won. But instead, he decided to come out and tried to be Mr. Nice Guy, Mr. Suit and Tie, Mr. Professional, and he got punished for it. I actually support the pardon because there's nothing more American than pardoning your criminal son. That's what it is. You never take sides against the family. For those of you watching, never forget that. You never take sides against the family. So we shouldn't be surprised. In fact, we should be happy about it. Let's get into more specifics here. It is true that Hunter was unfairly... Now, Biden comes out and he says that Hunter was unfairly targeted by the justice system. And it is true that Hunter was unfairly pursued for his tax avoidance and his gun registration form. Because on his registration form, he basically said that he wasn't a drug user, which we know is a lie, obviously. So those are two things that are true. And those are technically the crimes that he was being prosecuted for. But these are crimes that a lot of people commit and they don't go to jail. These are not things that you go to jail for. You shouldn't go to jail. In fact, I think all people who get guns should also be crack addicts, right? So, you shouldn't go to jail for being a drug addict and getting a gun. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. It's your Second Amendment right to own a firearm. We should let people own bazookas and tanks. Then we'd get a real peace. Actually, I don't know. Would there be more peace or would there be less? I'm trying to imagine the Crips rolling down Chicago with an Abrams, with an M1 Abrams, a massive American tank. I don't know. I feel like that could go south really, really poorly. I don't know. But then you'd have Lori Lightfoot. I mean, she's not in power anymore, but I really liked her. You'd have Lori Lightfoot, former mayor of Chicago, on her side with like flamethrowers and shit. That'd be great. That'd make for the artists in the audience, go ahead and mock that up for me and send it my way. We'll put that on the next episode. But so it is true that Hunter was unfairly pursued. He did commit crimes, but these are not jailable offenses. But the thing is this. What should Hunter have actually been charged with? He should have been charged with high crimes and treason. This guy went to Ukraine, sold American secrets, and traded those secrets for influence. And in exchange, not only was he paid off, but we basically gave aid to the country of Ukraine. So What's funny is that Trump was, for those of you who have forgotten, Trump was actually impeached twice. And I believe the second time was because, or it might have been the first time, but one of the times was because on a phone call, he did something called a quid, I don't know, a quid pro quo. I don't know Latin, whatever the fuck that is. But he basically made a two-way deal where basically he would give Ukraine aid, and in exchange, he would I forget even the specific. Basically, like, we would give money to Ukraine in exchange for something. I actually forget the specifics on this, but it doesn't really matter. My point is, it wasn't even that bad. Almost the essence of diplomacy is making deals with other countries. But yet Trump gets impeached for this. We actually have the son of the former vice president doing something way worse. And he's not even charged with it. They say there's a lack of evidence. So should Hunter Biden have been pardoned for the charges that he was being prosecuted for? Absolutely. He should have been pardoned. He shouldn't go to jail for these things. But he also should have been charged with high crimes and treason. And I think that's what people are really upset about. But once again, I say, don't be upset. Be excited. Be excited that we have the children of our leaders running around Europe and cutting deals on behalf of America. Have you ever seen how desperate a crack addict gets? Have you ever seen the desperation in their eyes? The way they shake and the way they grin at just the thought of another hit. That's the kind of guy you want cutting deals for you with Ukraine. That level of desperation, they'll get the job done. That's what you want. So even people being upset about this is completely ridiculous. Now, that's enough Biden talk. I know a lot of people in the audience don't like him, but I have a feeling that a lot of you are going to miss him in the same way that you miss that gentle touch on the shoulder in the morning. We're now going to talk about tariffs. Tariffs are Trump's, let's just call it, beacon. He's basically claiming that these tariffs are going to save the American economy. Now, for those of you in the audience who aren't as well versed in economics, first off, welcome. Welcome to your master's degree in economics. Tariffs are a tax on imported goods. So whenever you hear tariff, think tax. Let's do an example. A Chinese company is going to send a microwave over from Shanghai that they built in China. They're going to send it over, and they want to sell it in Target, your Target down the street. They want to sell it for $10. By the way, if you can find a $10 microwave, please let me know. My aunt and uncle need a new one. So if you find yourself this microwave in Target, it's $10. But all of a sudden, Trump is dropping a tariff of let's do a 10% tariff. Well, a 10% tariff on a $10 microwave is going to make that price of the microwave $11. That's what it's going to cost you. $10 goes to the Shanghai producer in China. Let's assume Target takes no cut. And the other dollar, is $11. So the final dollar, the 11th dollar, that actually goes to the government as a tax. Now, keep in mind that when you buy this microwave for $11 now, you then have to pay sales tax. You're actually getting taxed twice. Once at the tariff, once on the sales tax. But that's what a tariff is. A tariff is a tax on imported goods, and it's an embedded tax. And what embedded means is that you as the consumer have no idea that you're even being hit with a tariff. There's not some sign that says this product is subject to a tariff. You're not going to get that notification. Now, you could look at where it was made. And if you did enough research as a consumer, you could say, oh, this was made in China. China has a tariff going on. Okay, I'm paying a tariff. Now, what's the purpose of tariffs? Well, there's a good purpose, and then there's Trump's purpose. Let's do the good purpose first. The good purpose of tariffs, some argue, is that it protects American business. Let's do another example. An American company is selling microwaves for $10. They're making them in your backyard. There's an American company. They're two blocks down the road, and they're making microwaves. They're selling these microwaves for $10. Now, China, some guy in Shanghai, he's selling his microwave for $9. Well, the law of supply and demand says that people are just going to buy the $9 microwave, and the American producer will go out of business. But if we put a tariff on this microwave of, it's not 10% because, 10% of 9 is 90 cents. So we'll use back of the napkin math and say it's a 13% tariff. Who knows? but we're going to put a tariff on this $9 microwave such that the price of the microwave is now $10.15, whatever. Or, let's just say it's 10. So it was 9, but now with the tariff, it goes up to 10. The idea is that now consumers will say, maybe I'll buy the American microwave for $10, or maybe I'll buy the Chinese microwave for $10. This type of tariff is called a protectionist tariff. And the purpose of it is to protect American industry and stop all of our resources from being outsourced. Now, there's a very good argument here that protectionist tariffs are also not a good idea because once the tariffs go away, the business will collapse. That's number one. But number two, protectionist tariffs, they may protect sales within the United States because prices are equivalent for foreign and domestic goods. But they're not going to allow the American company to export. You see, once the American company, who's 2 blocks down the road, tries to export their microwave to Germany, they're just going to buy the Chinese one for 9. They're not going to buy the American one for 10. So another great argument against protectionist tariffs is that they inhibit the ability of American companies to compete internationally, which is a very good argument. Now, a good argument in favor of protectionist tariffs is that there are certain industries that you always want to make sure your country has, even if the price is high. Examples would be defense. We want Americans making bombs. That's what we want. We need guns, we need ammo, we need bombs. So, if necessary, we will put a tariff on foreign weapons of war to protect American producers. Now, the reality of the situation is that we basically just invade and conquer any other country that even tries to have their own military apparatus, or we turn them into a colony like Germany or Korea. But that's an example. Another example is agriculture. We want to make sure that Americans are fed, and the last thing we want is for us to be getting all of our food from Mexico. Now, we'll get some of it, the stuff we can't grow, the avocados, whatever. The things we can't grow, sure, we'll import them. But the things we can, like corn, wheat, and soybeans, we're going to use tariffs to protect those industries and make sure that Americans have access to food, even if it raises the price. Fun fact, every soda you buy is more expensive than it should be because we tariff sugarcane. Sugar comes from sugarcane. And we tariff, or in some cases, embargo the other nations that produce sugarcane. So we can protect, with protectionist tariffs, American producers of corn. You see, we don't use actual sugar in our candies. We use high fructose corn syrup, which comes from corn. That's a perfect example of a protectionist tariff. You, as an American, you pay more for your junk food because you're paying for the price of corn, not for the price of sugarcane. That's a perfect example. Now, what's the problem with Trump's tariffs? Well, Trump is going to do tariffs for reasons that are not protectionist, and he's going to put tariffs on industries and goods for which there is no American competitor. Let's go back to the microwaves. What if we're going to put a tariff on these Chinese microwaves, but remember I said there's 2 blocks down the road, they're making American microwaves? What if that factory doesn't even exist? What if Americans don't make microwaves? Well, if Americans don't make microwaves and we drop a tariff on foreign microwaves, we're now just paying more for our microwaves because there was no American business to protect in the first place. There was nothing to protect. Well, the vast majority of these tariffs, if the rhetoric is true, are going to go on goods where there's nothing to protect. So what that's going to do is it's going to drive up prices. And when Trump was running for office, he kept saying, no, prices aren't going to go up. Prices aren't going to go up. Well, just the other day, it might have been it might have been like Meet the Press, or he did some TV interview, I believe. And in this interview, I think he actually admitted that prices would go up on some goods. So there it is. The cat's out of the bag. So even he's admitting it at this point. But obvious, because it's economic fundamentals. But Trump thinks that tariffs are going to save this country. No, it's going to make it worse. We can't win a trade war. The United States runs massive trade deficits. We are not in a position of strength. We are in a position of weakness. We import more goods than we export. Always, all the time. If we drop tariffs on these goods, number one, we're going to get retaliatory tariffs. These other countries that we put tariffs on, they're going to put tariffs on us. So that's going to hurt our exports. I hope I'm not getting too high level here. But what I'm basically trying to explain is these other countries are going to retaliate. They're not going to take these tariffs lying down. That's number one. But number two, even that's a mistake. You see, the whole narrative around tariffs is that tariffs hurt the country that is being tariffed. So Trump is saying if we tariff China, China will suffer. That's false. If we tariff China, Americans will suffer because Americans are going to pay higher prices. What, you think that Americans are going to stop buying microwaves? Of course not. Everything is made in China or Vietnam. We don't make anything here in the United States. So what, you think people are going to stop spending money? Of course not. So the people who suffer from tariffs are not the exporting nation. So China, China's the exporting nation in this example. The people who suffer from tariffs are the importing nation, which is America. And that's why these other countries, when they do tariffs in retaliation, they're just hurting their own people. That's ridiculous. When a country is hit with tariffs, you know what they should do? They should do nothing. That's what they should do. They should do nothing. Because if they do retaliatory tariffs, they're just hurting their own people. They're not hurting the other country. Because once again, if we have, like for example, the United States, we have a competitive advantage in certain industries. We have a competitive advantage in aerospace. We have a competitive advantage in agriculture. We do have competitive advantage, but most of these advantages are in service sector jobs like education or finance or healthcare. Do you think these other countries are going to stop banking? Of course not. They're not going to stop banking. They're going to continue to bank. Okay, well, if they're going to continue to bank, or if they're going to continue to buy our planes, for example, well, then the only people suffering are the people of those other countries who have to pay higher prices because their own government implemented tariffs. So Trump is running on these tariffs, and the tariffs are not going to help. Let's get even more specific here. Trump has floated the idea of tariffing Canada, Mexico, and China. Okay, let's go down the line here. We should not tariff Canada. Canada is an American colony. They are basically a state. And I really like that Trump's been going on Twitter or X, whatever he calls it now, Trump, True Social, whatever. He's been going online and he's been saying, Governor Trudeau. I love this. He's calling him the governor and not the prime minister. Very funny. This is good stuff. What I also like is that he said it to his face. Absolute power move. Canada's the worst. We should annex them. They can keep Vancouver. Too liberal. So, but we could annex the rest, especially the prairies. I don't know if we have any listeners out in the prairies, but we love you guys. We'd love to have you. We'd finally have a land connection between, this great nation and Alaska. We would love to have your oil, your culture, your faith. We would love to have you. So please lobby your government. I don't know how your constitution works up there, but you know what? Fuck it. You don't even have to ask the government. You could probably just write a signed letter to Donald Trump himself, and we would probably invade and annex the prairies, which would be great for this country. You know what? That might even happen. Canada has such terrible geography and such a bad population bomb problem that who knows? Maybe in my lifetime or certainly my grandchildren's, we might just annex the whole country anyways. Might have to do a purge over there in Vancouver, though. They got some real weirdos over there. But all that to say, we shouldn't be tariffing Canada because Canada is a strong ally with the United States. That's number one. And number two, they buy like all of our stuff. I mean, we run a massive trade deficit with the rest of the world, but we have a great relationship with Canada. So we shouldn't hurt that. We shouldn't hurt that relationship. There's a lot of international trade that happens on the northern border, especially in that Great Lakes region, and we shouldn't do anything to hurt that. So we should not be tariffing Canada. I'm really just hoping that it's all talk and that it's all threats. But once again, the threat of a tariff is not even a good threat because the country who implements it is the one who ultimately suffers. So Canada, silly. Rather than tariffing them, just annex them, and that's a better solution. Next up, by the way, for those of you who don't know what annex means incorporate into the United States. Just make them, Canada's huge, so we'd probably have to chop it up into maybe 5 or 6 states, something like that. I don't know. Next up, we got Mexico. Once again, terrible idea. A lot of these goods, especially agricultural goods and some manufactured goods like cars and TVs and whatnot, are produced in Mexico and shipped over the border. For those of you who are curious, you should go on Google Maps and look at the border of Texas. You'll notice that on both sides of the border, you have massive cities. And these cities on the other side of the border, so these cities at the top of Mexico, these cities are industrial cities They produce goods and then they ship them over to America. And you're saying, well, wait a second. Why do they make them in Mexico? Well, it's because Mexicans will work for less. You're not going to work in a factory for $6 an hour. Fuck it. You won't even get out of bed for 9 or 10. You Northeasterners, you want $15, $16 an hour. You know, these Mexicans, they're beating you 3-1 on their salaries. So we make these goods in Mexico and we ship them over. Well, all of a sudden, if we tariff Mexico, we as Americans are going to have to pay more money for all the things that they're shipping over here. Absolutely silly idea. It's such a bad, I mean, we've got NAFTA. Trump got rid of NAFTA and made the USMCA, which is just a reskin, a remaster of NAFTA anyways. You know, this trade agreement saying there wouldn't be tariffs in North America. But now he's saying that they are going to do tariffs. I mean, make up your mind, Donald. You're really getting me scared here for the American people. The American people are broke. They're suffering. They're cold. They're desperate. They cannot afford your tariffs. And then we've got China. You see, China's an interesting one because there's the foreign adversary argument, which is basically that we want to stop importing goods from China so we're less dependent on them. Thus, we can set the grounds for a potential war. Let me be clear. I do not want to go to war with China. I really think that we shouldn't be involved in Asia in the first place. There's really nothing for us over there. And as long as we keep buying, the Chinese will keep selling. So we've got no reason to really be involved. It's economics, baby. So I don't know what we're doing. But if you want to make the security argument, that's fine, but you got to tailor the tariffs. You got to put them on certain industries and certain goods, like the banning of TikTok. I support the TikTok ban because it's a fact that they're spying on us. You know, I mean, there's a lot of American alternatives like Facebook. You've got your Instagrams, etc. I don't know. What do the kids use? Producer, what do the kids use?
Instagram, YouTube.
YouTube. We got YouTube, I guess. Whatever. I mean, you guys get the idea. We got to get rid of this TikTok because they're spying on our kids, they're spying on our people, and they're feeding us misinformation and just brain rot. They might not be feeding us false information, but they're convincing our youth to do dances and to record themselves dancing in front of the phone. I mean, these kids need to read. These kids can't read. I tutor these children, and they can't even read a sentence. These kids are in high school. Now, look, God bless them, but it's TikTok. You know, they're dancing. They're incredible dancers, especially the urban youth. These kids really know how to dance. But you can't export dancing, you know? So we got to get these kids reading and doing math and science. That's how we're going to defeat the Chinese. I mean, also, there's always that American ingenuity that they lack. So the Chinese ones, I'm still against because it's going to raise the price of American goods, and the people of this nation are already hurting from massive inflation. But it's of the three, there's the best argument there. He also has threatened tariffs against countries who aren't using the dollar as their reserve currency. Whoa, wait a second, slow down. The whole point of a reserve currency is that you don't have to sell it. The whole point of a reserve currency is that people want it from their own free will. On their own fruition, they want to use the dollar as the reserve currency. The second you have to start threatening people to use the dollar as the reserve currency, you blow open the facade and you're going to expose the truth. And the truth is that the dollar is worthless. But you got to keep up the facade as long as you can. And this threat to the nations of BRICS, for those of you who don't know, BRICS is a burgeoning alliance of foreign powers that are looking to disrupt America's control over the economic system. So that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That's what the letters stand for. But you've got newcomers into this. I mean, you've got Iran. I mean, this thing is really just becoming other countries. You got Egypt, you got Ethiopia. I mean, you've got, I don't know, the UAE. All sorts of countries are joining this thing. But at the end of the day, these countries have, how do I explain this? They have different international goals. Some of them literally have border dispute. Like China and India have an active border dispute between the two of them. The idea that these two are going to form an economic alliance and take down America is absolutely silly. But what's even more silly is threatening this fake alliance with tariffs. Fun fact, by the way, the alliance and the name BRICS was actually invented by American bankers. I believe it was actually J.P. Morgan. And they came up with that name to sell their international investment funds to Americans. So think about that. Americans are so silly that they actually created a fake foreign alliance to sell foreign investments to American consumers. These foreign countries got so much investment from Americans that their economies grew large enough for them to actually form the alliance and now threaten our global power. Talk about full circle. Okay, that's enough tariff talk. I know I've put you all to sleep, but now here comes the real sleeper, the real sedative. Everyone's favorite segment, but it has to happen. We're talking gold, we're talking inflation. Gold is down this week, price of approximately $2,650 an ounce. Still a massive surge of $2,000 just 1 year ago. Silver's also down 40 cents on the dollar, clocking in at $30.50 an ounce, but still, once again, a massive increase of approximately $22 a year ago. So although the prices are down this week and today, we've seen tremendous growth in this asset class in the last year. Now, inflation's up. You see, the Federal Reserve is going to lower interest rates again. So for those of you who are looking to borrow some money, maybe you're going to get a new car with a car loan. Maybe don't do that, by the way. Please, for those of you listening, never borrow money to buy a vehicle. It's one of the dumbest things you can do. Some people will disagree, but that's my stance. And here on the No Good News podcast, we take a stance and we stand by it. Don't borrow money to buy a vehicle. Those of you who are looking to buy a house, maybe wait a few months. They're going to drop this Fed funds rate from about, right now, I believe it's, give me a moment, let me think this through. Right now, the Fed funds rate is sitting at 4.5%, and they're going to drop it by another 25 basis points down to 4.25%. So for those of you with high yield savings accounts, you can expect your savings accounts to drop to approximately 4%, or those of you with a very nice savings account, your rate is probably going to drop to like 4.5, 4.4, slightly above the Fed funds rate. But we're going to see other rates of interest drop as well. But by lowering interest rates, this implies that the government thinks the economy is strong. Remember, when the economy is strong, the government lowers interest rates. And when the economy is weak, they raise them. That's how it should work. But the truth of the matter is, our nation is so deep in debt that they have to lower rates no matter what. You see, Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, came out, this was approximately a year ago, and announced that they were going to lower interest rates because they had defeated inflation. Those of you who have been following the news, or who are just living in this country, have noticed a massive rise in prices at the food store, for example. So the federal government, the Federal Reserve came out and they raised interest rates to at one point 5.25%, which is actually very low, but historically, but very high in terms of the last 20 years. Because for the last 20 years, for about 10 of those years, interest rates were 0.25%, which is absolutely ridiculous. And that's why our economy is so ill and weak and addicted to cheap money. But inflation just clocked in. We got the new number like today or yesterday. It's clocking in at 3%, or by some measures, even 3.5%. Well, if the government's inflation target is 2%, and by their own measures, which are skewed and underreport, but even by their own skewed measure of the CPI, inflation's coming in at 3 to 3.5%. Why are they lowering interest rates? It doesn't make sense. Well, the answer is obvious. They're lowering interest rates because the government is broke. You see, the federal debt is so high now. I think we just hit 36 trillion. You guys could check me on that, but it's up there. That the interest payments that we're making on our debt are approximately, I believe it's 15% of all federal income at this point. And as the debt gets higher and higher, that interest expense is also going to keep going up. And that's why the government has to lower interest rates. If interest rates remain high, the government is going to have to default or hyperinflate. Serious issue. The government has lost the inflation fight. And that's why you see, if you see gold or silver kind of, well, I mean, first off, it's up like 35% in the last year. But it's going to go higher. It's going to keep going up. Because the more dollars they print, for every dollar they print, gold has to go up in a commensurate amount. So we're going to see that continue to happen. So for those of you who want to protect yourselves against inflation, obviously buy your stocks, max out your Roth IRA, hit your 401k match. But you should consider gold and silver. Now, I know what I've got. I've got a few of you guys in the audience, you young kids. You love this Bitcoin thing. So let's talk about that for a second. Now, this Bitcoin thing, number one, Bitcoin is a speculative asset. It moves with the U.S. economy. When the U.S. economy goes up, Bitcoin goes up. When the U.S. economy goes down, Bitcoin goes down. That's the opposite of a reserve asset. A reserve asset is supposed to go up when the U.S. economy is doing poorly. That's what the definition of a reserve is. Because when your economy is doing poor, you can sell your reserve asset to stabilize your economy. Well, if your economy is doing poor and your reserve asset of Bitcoin is falling, well, then it's not a reserve, because when you sell it, you can't regenerate or rejuvenate your economy. That's the first thing. So Bitcoin doesn't even operate like a reserve asset. It operates like a stock. Stocks go up when the economy is good. Stocks go down when the economy is bad. That's how Bitcoin behaves. So if you want to buy Bitcoin as a speculative asset, fine, God bless. But I don't want to hear any more of this. It's a replacement for gold, or that it's a reserve asset. In fact, Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, this really shows you how little this guy knows about the economy. This is a direct quote from our chairman of the Federal Reserve, the number one economic advisor in the United States. Quote, Bitcoin is used as a speculative asset. That's true. Comma, it is a competitor with gold. That's false. Comma, not the US dollar. So much to unpack in this statement. Powell's saying that Bitcoin is a speculative asset, and that's a true statement. But he then says that gold is also a speculative asset. Gold is not a speculative asset. Gold is a reserve asset. But you see, Powell can't admit that, because to admit that gold is a reserve asset would immediately make the price of it rise to what it should be, not what it currently is. I mean, there's so much to say about gold. I mean, it's controlled by the banks. Very few citizens even own it. So there's a lot of monopoly control in the market. The Federal Reserve has a lot of it, and there's basically an international syndicate of these governments that try to keep it cheap. Because when gold goes up, it's a signal that these developed nations are weak, so they suppress the price on purpose. But every once in a while, they can only hold it down for so long, and that's why gold has spikes. You see, a lot of these stocks go up consistently. Like if you look at a stock, it might go up 3 to 4% a year, let's say. Like you could say, okay, if this is the price today, and looking at historical data, it'll be 4% higher next year. Gold doesn't operate that way. Gold might go 10 years barely moving. It might have an average rate of growth of 1% over a 10-year period. And that's because there's an international syndicate of JP Morgan, Chase, the Bank of England, the Bank of Europe, the Treasury that suppress the price. But every once in a while, they lose control. And then gold skyrockets by 40% in 1 year. Or gold doubles, or silver doubles within a year. And that's why gold moves this way. Gold is not a competitor with Bitcoin. Gold is a completely different thing. That's number one. Also, he says that Bitcoin is not a that Bitcoin is a competitor with gold and not with the US dollar. That's actually false. You see, you've got a lot of people now who are seeing the American dollar rise, because let's think about it, guys. When the dollar goes up in value against foreign currencies, that is an expression that the American economy is strong, not internally. Remember, you can have a weak economy internally, which I would argue we do have. But your economy can be strong externally. Foreign developments, foreign influence, wars, etc. That will make the dollar go up. Well, whenever the dollar goes up, Bitcoin also goes up. So it's just a complete nonsense argument from Powell. So yeah, inflation's coming in hot. And the problem is Trump's going to come into office and he's going to be blamed for this inflation. They're going to blame him for it. And it might taint his first administration. But we'll see. I'm going to drink some water and we'll do a quick ad break. Do you have random and disgusting shit lying around your house? Are guests refusing to come over because you won't let go of your battered garbage? If so, call Trash or Treasure. Trash or Treasure will help you part ways with your filth so you can turn your life around. Today they're running a special for one shit-stained sofa. What was once the pinnacle of 80s luxury, this purple suede has been reduced to a candle killer that resides in a middle-class home near you. Call Trash or Treasure at 980-438-4357 today for pickup of your trash or delivery of this scented treasure. We're back from the ad break. I really do encourage you guys to call up that number and get delivery. We're really trying to get this business off the ground. Now, let's wrap up this podcast with two final topics, the first of which being Syria, everybody's favorite shit show in the Middle East. For those of you who are unaware, Syria is a geographically important territory in the Middle East. I'm using the word territory because it's not even a country. It's a fake country with fake borders that were invented by the British and the French. So let's get that off the bat right at the start. Syria is important because it has oil, black gold, everybody's favorite. I love gold, but I love oil even more. Give me that oil. So, in Syria, in Syria, there's a lot of players involved. Syria has been run for the last, we'll ballpark it and say 15 years by this guy named Assad, okay? Assad is a puppet of Russia and Iran, I'm going to say Iran, but it might be Iran, I actually don't know. But he's a puppet of Iran. These are two powerful nations. Obviously, everybody knows about Russia, but maybe some of you guys don't know about Iran. And there's a great story about Iran as well, which maybe I would love to tell. It's a great story to tell the children around the fire, the story of Iran. But Syria has been run by Assad, who's a Shia. That's very important because these Muslims are very particular about their sects. S-E-C-T-S, sects. We've got the Shias and the Sunnis. You see, the Shias are religious descendants from Iran. According to Iran, 99% of their citizens are Shia Muslims, which is obviously a fake statistic. But Iran tried to make this crescent, this Shia crescent across the Middle East, which included Syria and Lebanon, which would be Hezbollah, and Palestine, which would be Hamas. And then obviously their own country. And today, Iran basically controls Iraq, and Iraq is a failed state. Keep in mind that pretty much everywhere that we go in the world, we create failed states. We're very good at creating. We tell people that we're going to bring them democracy, but we're really just going to bring them as cold water because they don't have any running electricity or sewage systems. So we'll bring you cold water, but we're not going to bring you democracy. Now, so that's the story of Iraq. So what's going on here is the Syrian regime under Assad has been propped up by the Russians and by the Iranians. The Iranians have been sending the country money, and they also have Syria funnel weapons to Hezbollah and Hamas. And in exchange, Assad gets money so he can continue running his government. In addition, Russia actually stations troops in Syria because the story of Russia is their search for a warm water port. You see, in the way the world works today, he who controls the seas controls the world. But the problem at Russia is they have an absolutely atrocious coastline. Despite the length of their coastline, I'm going to ballpark it and say 80% of their coastline is permanently frozen around the year because it's basically just touching the North Pole. So the story of Russia since the Soviet Union has been a search for a warm water port so they can dock their boats and build a navy. Well, they've only got two warm water ports. One is at the border of North Korea, very far and separated from the rest of their nation. And the other is in Sevastopol or Crimea, which is basically the south coast of Russia. But the problem with that is that they're blocked in the Black Sea. For those of you who really like geography, pull out a map. But my point is, Russia had some navy bases in Syria, and they were using these Syrian navy bases as their warm water port to control the Mediterranean Sea. Well, now Russia has to divert all of their resources out of Syria to fight their war in Ukraine. So all of a sudden, Russian forces have vacated, and they're not there to defend Assad. In addition, there is Hezbollah, who has been completely wiped out by Israel. I don't know if you guys have been following the news, but they put explosives in their walkie-talkies Have you heard about this?
No.
Okay, this is a great story. You're really going to like this one. You see, this goes back to that Israeli ingenuity. And if there's anybody you want on your side in a war, it's the Jews. These people are absolutely ruthless. Here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to tap into every single cell tower in Lebanon, every single one. And we're going to spy on the entire citizenry of Lebanon. Once we've identified basically 95% of the individuals in their military, which they call Hezbollah, once we've identified basically their entire staff and their phone numbers, we're then going to spy on them and use this information to thwart their attacks and attack their weapons depots. Then what we're going to do is we're going to let Hezbollah find out that we've been spying on them. What's this going to do? This is going to make the entire military of Lebanon stop using cell phones, and they're going to start using walkie-talkies. You following so far, producer?
Yeah.
Okay, so because look, we're being spied on. We can't use our phones. We got to use some other form of communication. Okay, well, what can we use? Well, okay, walkie-talkies. Those might do the trick. Let's get some long-range walkie-talkies, but we got a pretty big army, so we're going to need a pretty big order, maybe 30,000 walkie-talkies. Okay, well, let's order from a company. Let's buy some walkie-talkies. They've got a great price. I mean, I'm looking online here, and these walkie-talkies are really cheap. Let's buy these. They ship them in. Now, a few months later, a few years later, who even knows? Muhammad is walking around with a walkie-talkie on his belt, and all of a sudden it explodes. Boom, Muhammad's dead. Just like that, the entire military of your country, they're all dead or severely injured in the hospital because all the people with any sort of status whatsoever had walkie-talkies. Well, wait a second. How'd that happen? Did Israel somehow play with the walkie-talkie frequencies and make them blow up? No. You see, that's too complicated. You got to think simpler, producer. What we're going to do as Israelis is we're going to open up a shell company that produces walkie-talkies. It's a legitimate company. We're going to make thousands of sales all over the world. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put our walkie-talkies on steep discount, knowing that Hezbollah will buy them. And we're going to put explosives in every single one. We're going to sell these walkie-talkies.
Oh my God.
And we're going to wait. And boom, just like that, whole military of the entire country gets wiped out. And then on top of that, send in the Air Force, send in the fighters, send in the Moabs, the mother of all bombs, blow up their underground bunkers, kill everybody, citizens and military alike. And now all of a sudden, just like that, the second key pillar of Assad's support in Syria is gone. The Russians have left, and Hezbollah is decimated. By the way, we're the Israelis. We're going to go in. We're going to clean up. We're going to take some land. It's what we do. We're really good at it. Now, the third pillar, Iran. Okay, well, this shouldn't be too hard. All we got to do is threaten Iran, launch a few missiles at them, and make it very clear that we mean business. Look, at the end of the day, Iran is far from Syria. It takes a long time for them to get there. So the first two pillars were really the only ones of significance. Iran is the one that pays off Assad, but they are not really there in person. All of a sudden, there's multiple militias in Syria. These militiamen in Syria are former ISIS people. They're former Al-Qaeda people. These guys rise up, invade, conquer Syria in like a week and a half. They take Damascus, which is the capital, and boom, it's gone. Assad flees, gets on a plane. He's now in Russia. He'll probably live there for the rest of his life in refuge or whatever word you want to use. And now Syria is run by jihadist warlords, which is a very chaotic situation. But in the game of power and in the game of geopolitics, we would rather have someone that no one can control, like these jihadists, than have a crazy person who's controlled by our enemy, and that would be Assad. So that's the story of Syria, another absolute mess in the Middle East. But who knows? Maybe we can get out on top of this. Maybe we could get ExxonMobil in there or something, start doing some drilling. Who knows? I mean, that's what I would like to see, really. I mean, that's really my only interest in this place. Let's get the oil and let's get out. Maybe some opium. I don't know if they grow that over there in Syria, but I know they do in Afghanistan. So let's get in, let's get out, and then let's just not get involved. I mean, Israel took back the Golan Heights. That's a little side topic that we won't really get into. But ultimately, the winners of this conflict are the United States and are Israel, because we are basically able to topple a Russian and Iranian linchpin in the Middle East. So good job, America. Good job, Joe Biden, for whatever your involvement in this was. And let's give props to the real winners, the CIA. Good job, guys. Thank you all for listening to the No Good News podcast. Hope you learned something. Hope you had a good time. And we will see you soon. Cheers. Merry Christmas.